Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Welcome back to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle. I'm here with my incredible husband. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about Bikini 101, which was requested by actually several people who've been listening to the podcast and wanted to know a little bit more about how to progress through the ranks as a bikini athlete. So we'll be covering that today. And I'm excited to chat a little bit about that with you. And do you want to give me your check-in word for today?
Well, that's not fair. I'm not really a guest on the show. But my check-in word actually would be curious. And I'll explain a little bit about that. I'm curious about how we're going to go about this. I mean, I know we've talked about a broad brushstroke we've outlined this, but I'm also curious to because it's always evolving a little bit. There's some definite foundational stuff that I think we'll talk about today, but I'm also curious about the evolutions that we've seen in the past few years about how the sport has changed and become more dynamic.
Well, and there's a lot more opportunities that have been created, which is great. And of course, we're part of the NPC, which is the National Physique Committee. That's our amateur division. And then the IFBB, which of course is the International Federation of Bodybuilders, which is our pro division. And we're going to really kind of focus on how you start, what divisions are available to you to start with, and then how you can progress ultimately, which, the top goal is the Olympia, of course. So we'll kind of go through what that progression looks like.
And our purpose here is really to kind of address a first-time competitor or somebody who's maybe not even thought about competing yet, to the person who is thinking about competing, to the people who have competed, and hopefully we even have some tidbits for the seasoned pros and the seasoned amateurs that have been doing this for a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about strategies at every level, every step of the way. So we'll just start at the very beginning.
Yeah, so
very good place to start.
Let's go with this. I know that when we met, I told you that I had competed a while ago, and we'll just leave it at that as a while ago. But one of my goals was really to not necessarily compete, but to look like I could compete. And I think about that with a lot of people in the gym right now, is that if you're out there and people have said, wow, do you compete? Well, that should be a trigger for you in terms of, is that something you would consider? So maybe let's start there. I mean, if I'm in the gym, if I'm working hard, if I am taking care of my physique and I'm proud of my physique, I've built this physique, whether I'm a male or female, what do you think I should be thinking about in terms of whether I compete or not?
I think the places you go sometimes.
I know.
I mean, what should you be thinking about is this going to enhance your life? Is something that you enjoy, that you think is going to be fun? Would it complement the other things that are going on? Do you have time, room, energy, effort for it? And I know we've actually covered a lot of these things, and I think we could roll into some of these things as a complete separate topic. We did an episode on budgeting and what kinds of things you need for your competition. So there's a lot of pieces that are separate from this that are, I think, we have covered or will cover. But I really kind of want to stick to the nuts and bolts here so that we can kind of dive into, how people progress through it. And then, things that you want to consider along the way. So we keep it a little more succinct for this subject.
And I'm sorry, I asked a very inarticulate question. And so funny, I just downloaded a article from Harvard Business Review on how to ask better questions, and clearly I didn't read it closely enough. Because really the point that I wanted to make with that first part is, it all really starts with your why. Why are you doing this? Having a strong anchor to that aspect of why you're competing and what is pulling you to the stage or what is pulling you to that experience, I think is just really essential, whether you are a first-time competitor, whether you are a seasoned competitor. It covers that whole spectrum of interests. And just have that why. If your why is, well, because people at the gym told me I should should compete, I don't think you're going to find a very good experience in the competition world. It's got to be something more deep inside you in terms of the evolution of yourself. And I would say it also has got to go beyond the stage in terms of how is this making you better? Not just physically, but is it making you better emotionally? Is it making you better mentally? Is it making you more disciplined? Is it making you able to do your job better, whatever that job is? I just really wanted to get that out there kind of as a foundational element, that really start with your why, regardless of what level you're at.
Yep. And then once you've established your why, you've made the decision you're going to compete. At that point, we're going to jump into what's next. And I think that a lot of people get confused here, and I did as well. When I very first started, I started Googling, looking at the internet. Like, I just didn't really know where to go, where to find what shows were in my area. Even when I started looking at shows, how to pick one. So I think just kind of starting out with that. So you can get the entire list of shows on the NPC News website. So that's going to be a really great resource for you to find shows. And then you can decide, do I want to compete, close to home, which I think your very first time, most people want to compete close to home. That way friends and family can come. But I've had some people that maybe they're teachers or something else, and they actually don't want to, compete close to home because they don't want to have their students or other people be there. But that decision can be made. So, starting to look at the shows, if you're a first-time competitor, you're going to want to look at the regional shows. You'll have to qualify before going to nationals, which of course we'll talk about. But picking a show, figuring out where you'd like to have it. If you have a coach, then that's really helpful too, because the coach can help to guide you as to what shows might be better experiences than others. They're all different. Each promoter does things a little differently in terms of the layout of the schedule, which of course you can look at their websites and see. There are some that are 2-day shows versus 1-day shows. There's some that start early in the morning versus maybe a little bit later in the afternoon. I think you want to kind of consider all those variables before, deciding on a show. But, again, kind of that first show, I would make it as comfortable for yourself as possible. So kind of finding the parameters that fit well within your life and your schedule and your geographic region.
And as you describe that when you were starting to compete, I mean, we're 2008, 2009 timeframe.
Well, I was actually going back to like 1999 when
you first started, right? When you first started to compete, and that's good. And I will tell you, when I competed back in the 1980s. So yes, the 1980s, before most of you were born. But the interesting part of the evolution of the landscape is that, the information available to me in the 1980s, the information available to you in the 1990s, the information available to us when we were together in the, late 2008, 2009 timeframe, and the information available now, I mean, there is a ton. It's almost information overload. And that's a good thing because there are tremendous resources. It's also a challenging thing because it's hard to know which one to pay attention to. And what I would tell, I think the best piece of advice is the piece of advice that you have given before, which is go to a show. Go to a show and see what that experience is like. See if it resonates with you. See if you can picture yourself on that stage. And then make sure you're going to get, once you start Googling this stuff, you're going to find a whole bunch of different outlets for it. The NPC IFBB is a great source to start. It's a foundational place to start for information. Go-to source. It is the federation, the organization that sponsors these shows, or that sanctions these shows. Thank you. So just be mindful that you are going to get a little bit of information overload. It can feel like drinking from the fire hose at times, and making sure that you are looking at trusted resources. But most importantly, and I can't emphasize this enough, is rely on your own judgment and what you can actually experience versus what people tell you. Because this is a very individualized sport. Everybody's experience is a little bit different. And I would really encourage you to go to a show to figure out what that experience is like.
Yeah, absolutely. Having resources. There's so much information that we didn't, like you said, have access to online. And then, of course, asking other people, go to a show, meet people, ask questions. Our community is really friendly, and I find people to be very helpful. So once you kind of start to know people a little bit and learn and ask questions and start to build your own support structure, whether that be coaches or other athletes in your area, going to seminars, things like that. All those things can help you get involved and just keep asking questions. Don't be shy.
Can I add one thing on that?
Yeah, of course.
I think as you're building this circle of people that you trust about, there's a difference between asking somebody who says, well, you should do the X, Y, and Z, which may have worked for that person versus another person that you go to and they start asking you questions. Hey, why do you want to compete? Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I really find that the best sources of information are the people who want to know about you rather than tell you about themselves or tell you about what worked for them. That may get into that later, but I really think focusing on people that are curious about, hey, tell me why you want to compete. Tell me, have you gone to a show? Some just baseline questions to figure out and again, this traces back to your why, but do draw that distinction. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think that is excellent advice. And I mean, when I do a consult, I spend the first half of it really asking a lot of questions. I want to understand, what is your goal? I have people that are like, I want to turn pro, maybe they've never even stepped on stage, but they have this dream, they have this vision. Other people might come in and go, it's a bucket list thing. I just want to see how I compare. I just want to go, so there are different goals and there's different things to think about. And I want to keep us kind of on the track of the, kind of breaking down the nuts and bolts, because I know we do go into a lot of the more like philosophical sort of items, but I kind of want to keep us on the nuts and bolts here. So I kind of want to jump over to
that's cue for me to stay on target because I'm going down a rabbit hole, which is fine. And that's
no,
true.
And I love everything you're talking about. I really want to be able to give people a roadmap with this particular episode. So when you've chosen your show, you've done your research, you've gone to NPC News, you've looked at the different websites, you've decided on a show that you think looks like fun. Of course, you can check out their Instagram, see what they're posting with their athletes. There's just do your homework, do your research, go to one of those promoters, go to the promoter show that you think you might want to compete in. That's a great way too, because like you said, like a lot of the promoters do multiple shows each year. So you have an opportunity to go and see what is, does it look fun? Do you like the stage? That kind of thing. From there, you've picked your show, you're going to want to register for your show. So pay attention to the timing. Some shows do have a cutoff as to when you can register by, or you have you pay a little bit more if you don't register by a certain date. So I would look at the website, see what that looks like, and make sure that you're marking that on your calendar. I usually tell people don't register any earlier than you have to because life happens. You never know. Somebody could get sick. There could be an accident. There could be things. So I always tell people, don't wait till you get to the show to register because then you're going to pay more for that. But, see when that cutoff date is. And then from there, we can start talking about, what divisions that you can compete in.
And as we're talking about the website, just a couple really quick administrative notes on that is if there's a host hotel and you're going to be staying at that host hotel, that may be something you want to book early, or then you do want to enroll. A lot of times you can cancel that reservation and completely refund. And again, read the print, read the limitations and the restrictions. But at least getting the hotel, if you do plan to, if you're going to a remote show, that's something to take into consideration. Also, look at whether that show offers live streaming or not, just to be aware of that as you're selecting a show. If you have family or friends that want to attend and they are not able to attend because of the distance of travel or a host of other things of life matters, just know that. It's not a decision point for you to do or not to do a show. It's just things to pay attention to as you're looking at that website for what that show experience is going to be like.
That's great advice. And usually the promoters do have a hotel room block. So yeah, and that does expire a lot of times too. So that's a good point. You can look at that at that point, because if you are going to need a hotel, you want to go ahead and book it ahead of time. I always advise staying at the host hotel, although you're going to want to see, do they have a refrigerator? Do they have a microwave? Like what kinds of facilities do they have? And is that going to meet your needs? I feel like this, for most people, starts to be more important as we get to that next level, which we'll talk about at the national level, because most people are traveling and those hotels book up a lot faster than the regional shows because they're just bigger. Regardless if you're going to stay there, I really feel like that's a great thing to look at right away.
There's, as you point out, there's really no advantage to registering early, other than that you have that that registration, and if that's a motivator for you, then so be it. But there's really no advantage to doing it,
Right.
so
Unless there's a cutoff and a
Right.
fee increase. I know for the nationals, it can be in some cases pretty hefty,
So
a
let's
couple
talk about
$100.
the NPC divisions then.
Yeah. So going into your regional level show, your very first show, you can compete in the true novice division. That's the one and only time you can compete as a true novice. That means you've never competed before. I really recommend people do it because you can only do it once.
Right.
To me, the very first time you compete, I say if you can afford it, because I mean, obviously you do have to pay per division, but do as many as you can. Get all that stage time. You've put in the time, the energy, the effort, the hard work. Then you want to get up there and practice, the very first time. As much as you are going to practice your posing and everything else, once you get on stage and that adrenaline's going and, the excitement and everything else, it's going to feel different. So usually that first time you step up on stage, which the true novices go first, that's going to be when you're your most nervous. And then if you're doing other divisions, and we'll talk about the others as well, then you're going to be getting more and more relaxed and comfortable as you go. And usually by your last division, you're okay, I got this, So if it's your very first show, I really do recommend jumping into the true novice division.
And we'll talk about this in another episode as we get deeper into philosophy of this and just mindset. But I do want to just insert one note here. Sorry for going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Maybe this is just a pothole, about set your expectations as you're going into the show. And that's where I want to tie it to the true novice experience, is that for your first show, your goals, your objective, I'm not going to talk about goals, I'm just going to talk about objectives. Your objective should be get on stage, showcase my physique, get that experience, get the feedback from the judges, and then see if you like it. That I can't emphasize that enough. I know you're going to the show to win. Hopefully you're going to the show to win. That's going to be true of every show that you're going to compete in. But for this first show in particular, you've got to really put it in your mind, that objective of, look, I want to get on stage. I want to see what this is like. I want to get that time to really practice not to apply what I've been practicing for these days and weeks going into that show, what I'm going to showcase on show day.
Yep.
So from true novice to the other divisions.
Right. Each of these divisions is split up in a height category. So in true novice, depends on the size of the show. Sometimes there's only one.
For the height is we're just talking about bikini, figure, and
well, this is Bikini 101. So
that's true. That's right. Okay,
I was sticking with bikini.
That's fair enough. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. So what I was saying is, for a smaller show, sometimes they'll only have one true novice. If it's a bigger show, they have more true novice. Sometimes they're split it in 2 to 3 divisions. Those are all by height. So when you go to check in, they're going to measure you and then let you know what classes you're in. I do recommend, sometimes they won't tell you. So I always recommend people ask, just so you know once you get there. And that'll help you prepare mentally. So we talked about true novice.
We forgot one thing though, your NPC card. So if you're going to compete in an NPC show, you need to get that NPC card before you go to the show. You can usually register for it at the show. Yeah. But
it'll just save you some time if you've done it ahead of time, and then just have it on your phone so you can show it. Yeah. But I mean, they will let you do it there, but it's just one more thing you don't have to worry about if you do it ahead of time. So I agree. That's a really great idea. And again, you can do that on the NPC News website. So then we go into the true novice division. The novice division. So the novice division, you can compete in as long as you've never won an overall before.
An overall in the novice category.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And novice or open, if you've won an overall period,
right.
Then you're no longer eligible for the for the novice division. And this is all age groups for both of those. There's no separation for the age groups in these in the true novice or in the novice division. It's just height classes. So again, to me, it's more stage time. Just allows people to really get that additional opportunity to work through the kinks and, get their posing. Most people are going to still do the open, which is the next category that I was going to introduce, the open categories, or unlimited, sometimes it's called, is for anybody. So any age, it doesn't matter if you're new, if you've been around for a long time. It is split in height classes. Sometimes I know people on their very first show can be a little intimidated to go into the open. I really encourage people to do it. Sometimes people place better in the open than in the novice or the true novice because there are more height classes. So it ends up sometimes there's not as many in each class. It just kind of separates everybody a little bit. So you just never know. At the end of the day, it's more stage time if it's something you can swing. If you can't afford to do all three, and your very first time, I probably would say go true novice and open. If you can do all three, I think it's really great to do all three.
What if you could do only one?
If you can only do one and it's your very first show, I probably would do true novice just because you can only do it the very first time.
Right. And I think the thing to sprinkle on that as well is that, because again, this gets into that whole goals and objectives and where you want to go with this. And the purpose for competing in the open categories is to be able to qualify for nationals. And first or second place in an open class is required to compete at the national level. And I understand the allure of that. I also know that when you get to the nationals, and if you're wanting to microwave this and go fast track to get to that pro card, sometime, and we'll talk about this differently another time, but it's that accelerated mindset that you need to just kind of measure a little bit. That first show, go for the experience. It's not just about really qualifying for the nationals. If you are competing in a small show and there are not that many competitors in that show, doing well in the open may not necessarily set you up for success at the national stage. I'm just being super candid with that, is that if you're in a small show and you win the overall in an open, it may not necessarily give you that measure against how you'll do at the national level, which is really what you want to do in the open classes. So just something I think you should take into consideration. I agree with you. If it's my first show, I would really do the true novice for the experience.
Yeah, and everything you're saying, I completely agree with. I think about my experience when I started out competing in NPC. I did well. I won my class at multiple shows. Thought, man, I'm going to nationals. I'm ready. I'm going to go do this. And then I think I was in a sea of 40 plus, nearly 50 athletes, and I was in probably the last call outs, if not second to last call outs. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm over here. Don't forget me. It's, I think it's important to understand that, each level is going to be significantly different than the one before. So being in a rush to go through sometimes leaves you not as prepared. Because I had done, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 shows before I hit the national stage and placed first, and still wasn't quite ready for that next level. So the other thing I hear from people quite frequently is where they say, I want to get on stage and qualify as quickly as possible so I can compete next year in nationals. So just to explain, when you do place first or second in the open, that's going to qualify you for the rest of the year that you're in and the entire year afterwards.
So if I finish first or second in a regional show in 2023, let's just say April, since we're in April of 2023, I'm now qualified for all of 2023 and for 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So when people tell me that, and especially if I've got somebody who's new and needs to build muscle, but they're like, I just got to get on stage as quickly as possible so I can qualify, so I can compete in nationals next year. My thing is that if we can't win at a regional level, we have no business going to nationals. I'd rather do a warm-up show, spend that time building, spend that time really getting that athlete ready so that they're able to bring their very best, rather than losing time cutting down doing a prep just to then go back into an improvement season to cut down and do another prep. So it kind of cuts into that time. And if you're new and you need muscle, if you don't, then that's a whole different thing. But I do think that that's kind of like a mistake that people make. I would prefer to do, your regional show to qualify for nationals within 4 to 6 weeks prior to the national show that you're looking to do. And that way, if you get feedback and some slight corrections need to be made, that are something that can be done in 4 to 6 weeks. Now you've got time to do that, but it's not like you've got a whole, 12 weeks, 16 weeks to then go into a small break, but then jump right back into a prep. I've seen people make that mistake, and then they're not bringing their best to the national stage.
Right. And I just, from a scale and scope of this thing, just realize that I'm going to give you just round numbers or general numbers here, but on any one weekend, there are 5, 6, 7 shows going on nationwide at a time. And this excludes international shows. So when you're thinking about just that national stage. And what made me think about this was what you were talking about, the experience going to nationals, is that if there are 5 or 6 shows going and you have 5 or 6 competitors in each class, 10 competitors in each class, or 2 competitors in each class, A through H, that are qualifying for nationals, just start thinking about the numbers that are then qualifying for nationals and what the difference in competition is going to be at that regional show versus that national show. So I say that just to manage your expectations about what the national show experience is going to be like, because it's markedly different than a regional show.
It really is. And there's nothing wrong with competing at the regional level for a while.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I encourage it. So you don't have to be in such a hurry to get to nationals. We're going to, kind of jump up to that next step, because the purpose of this is to help people understand what the progression looks like. I just wanted to say, though, that it's okay to enjoy competing at the regional level for a while before you even go to nationals. Make sure you're ready. And like you said, if you're getting, some second places and some smaller shows and things like that, then that might mean, hey, let's make some improvements first before we take that next step, because nationals is expensive. It does require travel, and it's going to be a rude awakening. If you've been doing smaller shows and just competing at a local level, you're going up against people that have been competing for a really long time. A lot of times they've won many, many shows. It's going to be, you're going to have to go into that first national show, gauging your expectations and kind of going in with that curiousness of, how do I compare versus,
right.
Okay, I did really great at these regional shows. I'm expecting to now win my pro card. It happens. Don't get me wrong. It happens. Right. It's less likely to happen. There is a progression and a lot of hard work and improvements and getting more comfortable on stage, all those things that are going to be important at that next level.
And I will tell you this, when Jami talks about that, and again, we're probably getting a little bit away from the nuts and bolts and a little bit more into the philosophy, but it does play on this, is that I will always ask people at the nationals if they don't get their pro card and they're disappointed. And a lot of them have just done one regional show and done well. I mean, we've had overall winners at regional shows and go to nationals and just get swallowed up because for a lot of reasons. One, that maybe they weren't in front of the judging panel that judges the national shows. And I do think we should talk about judging panels at regional shows as well, but the makeup of those. But they will just get swallowed up at the national level. And it just happens. I'm not saying it happens every time, but it does happen. And their level of disappointment. So the questions I always ask are, okay, so let me ask you a question. If you would have gotten your pro card at this national show, what would you do next? And they'd say, compete. And I'd say, okay, well, if you're going to compete, what's the difference? And I get it. The pro experience is a different experience than the amateur experience or the NPC experience. I completely understand that. But when you look at yourself as an athlete, you should be wanting to perfect your craft, to be the best you can be. This is what the sport of bodybuilding is all about. So competing is competing. And if you're competing at the regional level and you are still honing your body and evolving your body, then you're doing what you need to be doing in the you versus you contest, which is really the contest that matters. So we tell you all this just to manage those expectations, because it can be a real slap in the face to go from that regional show overall victory. You're getting all the accolades, and depending on the regional shows, I mean, some of the prizes that they offer, the trophies and everything else, like trophy, tiara, Wolfpack bag. I mean, we've seen all those things. It can be a lot. It can fill your head that, hey, I'm going to do really well at the national level. And when you go to the national level, it's just a different experience.
So quickly, I wanted to address one of the things you said that I think I could give a little bit of guidance on when it comes to choosing a regional show. If your goal is to really find out whether you're ready for nationals, you've been competing, you're competitive, you want to do a warm-up show or you want to do a qualifying show. My advice usually, obviously, if you're working with a coach that really understands the industry and the shows, then they can, of course, guide you. If you're coaching yourself or you're working with someone and they're kind of leaving it up to you, what I would do is look for a show that's got a Bikini Pro show at it. That's going to guarantee you've got a higher level of judge there, because those are going to be the pro level judges that are going to be there. So you're most likely going to get a little bit better feedback. But if you're working with a coach that understands, they're going to know, what judges are going to see you at the national levels, what judges are really great at, responding and giving feedback. Some of them will stay after and give you the feedback. That's hugely important when you go to that next level that we're talking about. So let's jump over to nationals. And and talk a little bit about how nationals work. There is a progression throughout the year. You're going to start the first national show of the year, and I'm talking about the U.S. because there are opportunities worldwide as well. And if you want to know about those worldwide opportunities, there is a worldwide section on the website of all the shows there on the NPC News. So you can go there and look at the worldwide shows.
And just one little note on this is nationals and pro qualifier are equivalent.
Right.
So pro qualifier means that if you get a placing within the criteria for that particular show, you've qualified to be admitted in the IFBB.
Right. And each show is a little different. So this is what I'm going to break down quickly. And of course, you can get all this information by going to the websites. This is all something you want to consider, though. So the first national show in the U.S. of the season is Junior USA's. I'm sorry. Let me back up. There actually is the Arnold
That's
Amateur.
true.
So there are some pro cards given. I believe it's the top three overall.
Two or three, yeah.
At the Arnold. So basically what that means is you would need to win your class, then you compete with all the class winners, and you have to be in the top of the overall. So that is the first opportunity to earn a pro status of the year.
And that information, by the way, is available on the website for the show. So it'll tell you how many pro cards are given per show. And
yes,
so,
and you want to check anyway, because it
right.
does sometimes change. What divisions they have at the shows, how many pro cards are given. So I agree. Like, you always want to look at the website. They did actually change that show, which I really liked this year. It used to be prejudging was on one day, and 2 days later was finals, and that was really tough on the athletes. They did it all in one day this past year, so I think it made it a much smoother, more fun show for the athletes. So that is a great one to consider, and plus you get to see all the pros, and there's a huge expo, and you can kind of make a whole weekend out of it. The next one is Junior USA's. I really love Junior USA's, and just so you know, like, the way that these shows were designed, the progression, it gets more difficult as the year progresses. So if you're a brand new first time at the national level competitor, competing earlier in the season can be a good idea. It's going to be a little bit smaller with the shows, a little bit less daunting, a little bit, it's going to be a little less stressful than the shows as they get later in the year. So I like to bring that up as well. Junior USA's is similar in that you do have to win your class. I'm sorry. Arnold's in Columbus, Ohio. Junior USA's is in Charleston, South Carolina. Beautiful there as well. So it's a nice place to go. So you'll need to win your class there and then compete for the overall. And then it's going to be top 4 overall that's going to earn a pro card.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, verify that for me, please. So I really love that show. Again, I mean, it's really well done. Again, it's a little bit smaller show. So I feel like,
and by top, and so we're clear, top 4 in bikini categories, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H.
Correct.
So, so what's that? 8 categories, I think.
Right. Height classes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see the breakdown of the height classes also on the website. They go up by about an inch per class. So class A, of course, is the shorter athletes. And so I believe it's all the way up through 5 foot or 5'1", and then they go up by an inch. And then, of course, H being your last class is going to be everybody over, I want to say 5'8"
and above, I think.
Yes. So of course, you can see all those broken down, but that's how it's going to happen at the national level. At the regional level, sometimes they'll have less classes, just based on how big the show is. But at nationals, that's what you're going to see is the A through H. I just realized, I'm so sorry, we did not talk about the master's classes.
That's right. Yeah,
at the regional level.
Let's back up. Okay, so rewind, edit. Okay, so rewind back to those regional shows. We talked about the true novice, we talked about novice, we talked about the open. What we did not talk about is the master's classes. So master's classes usually come 35 plus, 40 plus, 45 plus, 50 plus. There are some that do 55 and 60. At the regional shows, sometimes people are, it depends on the number of competitors and athletes that they have show up. So some of those categories will vary on show day depending on the number of athletes that are had. The beauty of the master's classes is that to qualify for a master's national pro qualifier, you just have to have competed in a master's class in a regional show.
Right. You just have to have competed in a
Right.
regional show within that prior calendar year.
Right.
Yes. And not every regional show has all of the age groups that Greg just went off of. So you'll want to look. So say, for example, you're over 45. Some of them only go like 35 and 40. Some have 35, 40, and 50. I mean, at the regional level, sometimes they don't have all the groups. So if you're looking for a specific age group, I really recommend for those masters athletes, go to a bigger show. The other thing is going to be if you're at a smaller show, a lot of times they'll only have one height class for the whole age group. So if you're a 5 foot tall athlete, you might be next to a 6 foot tall athlete,
Right.
which is really hard to compare. And especially if you're new. So I know sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to do a smaller show because it's easier to get qualified or whatever the situation is. A lot of times the bigger shows turn out to be a little bit better and they're able to split up the classes a little bit more. So don't be afraid is kind of where I'm going with this.
Easier to get qualified should never be your standard. And I mean, especially in the master's classes, because in the master's classes, you're qualified once you compete. So in
you just want to know if you're competitive.
That's right. That's
so
right.
like you want to get up next to as many competitive athletes as you can before you hit the national stage to see how competitive you are. Don't be afraid of that. Like that's the whole point. So yeah, sorry, I diverted. So, kind of going back to nationals, there is no masters division pro cards given at either of the first two shows that I talked about. So there
that's right. Okay.
There are masters that compete at the Arnold, but there are you cannot earn a pro status.
It's not a pro qualifier for masters.
For masters, correct. And then at the Junior USA's, which is the other one we talked about, there's no masters available. If you're masters, you can compete still.
Right.
I mean, you can compete in the open again, but there's just not going to be a specific class for your age group.
And I think we might need to have that conversation separately about, if you're a master's level athlete, I know that some master's level athletes want to get their pro card in the open versus in the masters. And I think you're uniquely qualified to talk about that, but we can talk about that another time, unless you want to talk about it now.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say don't limit yourself.
Okay.
I was over 40 when I earned my pro card. I was right around 40. And I was competing as a masters. I was competing in the open. I did end up I actually did not turn pro 2 weeks before at the Masters Nationals, and then did turn pro and then the Open. So you just never know. It depends on who's there, and
there are a lot of variables that go in.
Yeah, to me, take every opportunity you can. That's my opinion on that. So if you're Masters, don't be afraid. Like, I know sometimes people the judges are going to see me as Masters and they're not going to believe I'm competitive in the Open. That's a fallacy. I mean, we have several athletes at a pro level that are old enough to be masters, but are at the Olympia.
Right.
And I was over 40, when I did it. So I just, I feel like don't limit yourself, do all the classes. I did all of them. So when we talked about Junior USA's.
And can we pause for just a second? I want to just go back to the regional shows for a second. We didn't really talk about this, but at a lot of the regional shows, the overall, so we have seen regional shows that have an overall for true novice. We have seen regional shows that do not have an overall for true novice. We've seen shows that have an overall for novice and some that don't have an overall novice always has an overall, because that is what would disqualify you from then competing in novice in the future. No? Am I wrong? Okay. Explain then.
It's just going to be based on the size of the show.
Okay.
There may not be more than one novice. I just don't want to say there's always an overall.
Fair.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And I mean, the overall is honestly, it's for fun. Like, the placing's the placing, and then the overall is for fun. So I kind of want to keep us on track, because I know our time is kind of, and I want to make sure we get through all these pieces. So after the mid-May Junior USA's is the Junior Nationals. The Junior Nationals is in Tennessee. It's in Chattanooga currently. What makes this one unique is there's actually a pro show attached to it. So
starting this year.
Yes, starting this year, this June, if you earn your pro card at the Junior Nationals, you're able to literally jump in and compete as a pro right then and there at the show, which is so cool. I think that's really fun and neat. That one does give one pro card per height class. So now we're getting into, that's quite a bit more, because we're talking about 8 pro cards versus 4 at the Junior USA's. And again, you know, it's like sometimes people go, oh, I'm going to not do junior USAs because there's less pro cards. Well, there's also going to be less athletes for that reason. So, you know, I think it's really important to, you know, not only look at how many pro cards are given, you know, it's also when are you going to be ready? What makes sense for your life? You know, those kinds of things. You know, where, you know, maybe one's closer than the other. So give yourself the opportunities. But I love Junior Nationals. I think it's just such a great show, and I love that they added
no
that.
Masters Pro cards at Junior Nationals.
No, again, no Masters. Correct. Yes. So that's going to be our June show.
Third show.
Yep. So that's our third show of the year. Now we jump into July. This is where we have a lot of shows in July. And this is where the Masters get involved. So our first show in July is going to be the Bikini Universe. That is in Teaneck, New Jersey, currently. And it's great. It's a really great show. They've got all the Masters divisions, one pro card per height class for the Masters divisions, and 2 pro cards per height class in the Open. So if you're 40, then you could get, you know, you have an opportunity in the over 40, you have an opportunity in the over 35, and you've got 2 opportunities in the Open. So I love that show for that reason. It's also really well done. You know, it's I would look at the schedule because sometimes it is a 2-day show, but everybody does prejudging and finals on the same day. So you don't have to compete 2 different days. You just got to see which day your division's going on. I believe Bikini's going on Friday this year.
I think so. Yeah.
Anything you want to add on that
Nope.
one? You want to talk about the next one?
Nope.
Okay, 2 weeks later.
I want you to. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if you're a Masters athlete and you're at the national level, and you can be ready if it works for you, I think starting with Universe is great because let's say you do Universe and you're 1 or 2 or even 3 spots away from earning your pro status, then you can compete 2 weeks later at the Masters Nationals, it's actually called the Teen Collegiate and Masters Nationals. It has all 3 of those divisions. If you're a teen or collegiate athlete, that's a great opportunity to kind of get your feet wet at the national level. There are no pro cards for the teen or collegiate folks, but it just gives them an opportunity to get some exposure, get some feedback from all the top judges. It's a really, really fun show. It's
Big show.
Yeah, it's in Pittsburgh, and you can find, and I should have talked about the websites. GaryUdit.com is going to be the website for this show. Bev's gym is for Universe, and then I believe Junior Nationals and Junior USAs are just Junior Nationals, Junior USAs. Right. But of course, you can Google NPC Masters Nationals, and it'll bring you right to it. There is no Open at this show, so that's going to be the one disadvantage if you're wanting to do Open. There's only Masters, but there's every age group, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. We even have these 60 plus ladies looking incredible. So if you've never come, it's kind of funny because everybody's like, you know, did we check IDs on these ladies? I mean, they just look amazing. So it's a lot of fun to watch these shows. But that would be one pro card per class for the Masters ladies at the Masters Nationals.
Is that the show that's followed by the Masters USA, the pro show?
I do believe there is a pro show the next day. They moved it from it was after North Americans, and then they moved it to Masters Nationals. I do believe Masters World is still there. So yeah, you can compete at that one if you get your pro card the next day, which is also really fun.
Yeah.
And with that, again, like I would register for all the classes. You just never know. Right. I mean, let's say I'm over 45 and, you know, I get beaten over 45 by one lady who didn't register for the over 40. And then I'm able to, I mean, you just don't know. So to me, I'm like, hedge your bets. You're there. You did all the hard work, do all the classes, more stage time, and stay after and get your feedback.
Yeah.
Please. Just, you know, people don't want to, you know, I understand everybody's tired and hungry, and that kind of takes us on a whole different direction. But I definitely recommend if you're doing nationals, that's where you really want to get your feedback. That's what's going to help you make sure you're making the improvements to come back even better.
So North Americans is next, right?
USAs,
that's right. USAs this year in Anaheim, California.
Right.
Not in, so previously in previous years, in fact, where you competed and where you got your pro card was in Las Vegas. And now they've moved it to Anaheim this year, Muscle Contest Productions. And that is a pro card in that's 2, right? 2 in every open class. And there is no Masters at USAs.
Correct. Yep. That's all correct.
And then we go to North Americans, right?
Right. So then the next show is going to be North Americans. That one's typically the last weekend.
Is that Gary Udit or that's Gary Udit, right? Or is that Bev Francis?
That is Gary Udit.
That's for Gary Udit. Okay.
Correct. Yes. So that's Gary Udit. That one's usually like last weekend of August, first weekend of September. Always my birthday. I had 1 year had two of my athletes take two of the overalls, and then one of them, happy birthday. That was a really great birthday present. So anyway, so that one I love. North Americans. That one is one pro card per class for the open. One pro card per class for the masters. So it is less pro cards. One of the other unique things about the North Americans is anybody in North America can compete. So
Canada, Mexico.
Correct. So Canada, Mexico, US, that is unique to North Americans. One thing I didn't mention about the Arnold, which is also true for the Olympia Amateur, those two are open to international athletes. The rest of these national shows I'm talking about, you do have to be a US citizen to compete in them. So that is a unique thing about North Americans. It's really neat because you get, some athletes you don't get at some of the other national shows because they're coming down from Canada or coming up from Mexico. Really, really awesome show.
Great show.
Yeah, we love it. So after the North Americans, we have a big break after that. So we don't really have any pro qualifiers in the U.S. until the Olympia Amateur. The Olympia dates have moved a couple different times due to COVID and other things. This year we're in October.
In Vegas.
In Las Vegas, and it has changed locations. It's gone from Orlando to Vegas a couple times, so that's one you'll always want to check on. But typically it's in Vegas. It will be there this year. And for that one, it is going to be similar to the Arnold in that you have to win your class and then you have to place in the overall. And I want to say it's top three,
yeah,
in the overall.
And just one perspective on this really quick is that in going to the Olympia and the Arnold Amateur, there are a lot of athletes that want to compete in those shows for the prestige or the ambiance, the experience of having of earning your pro card at one of those events. The competition, what we've seen, has been really stiff at those smaller classes, but really tighter competition. And that's not a do or don't do it. That's just be aware of that. Even though there's a limited number of pro cards, the athletes coming into those shows, they're really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think part of that has to do with the international aspect of it, because a lot of international athletes, that's one of their only opportunities to be able to compete in the US. So you do get some really good quality international athletes. One thing I just realize, I'm sorry for keeping jumping back, but one of the other unique things about the Arnold is if you win the overall in the Arnold Amateur, you are automatically invited to compete as a pro the following year. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about the pro in a few minutes here, but the Arnold Pro is a invitational, so you ought to get an automatic invitation. So that is something unique to the Arnold, which I forgot to mention that. That is not true for the Olympia Amateur. So, but like you said, it is a prestigious show. It's a beautiful stage. Typically not as high numbers, but very good quality athletes at that show. And again, you would have to win your height class and the overall. They do have a master's division there, but there are no pro cards.
Right.
Our pro status is awarded for the masters at that particular show.
And when we say typical, by the way, we mean that's what we've seen up to this date. It changes every year. So I would not take that as gospel. I would just recognize that what typical, I mean, it's just what we say it's that's what we've experienced. So the next show then would be Olympia Amateur, which we covered. And then the last show of the year is our pro qualifier in the United States is Nationals.
Right. And one of the things I do want to mention, if you competed in the summertime, and you got the feedback you need muscle, my suggestion would be shut it down and then come back next year. If you end your season, let's say you did North Americans, maybe you couldn't do the North Americans, you did USAs or something else, and you got feedback, keep going, you look great, you're really close. At that point, then I would say, maybe push and,
right,
find a way to make it work to do some of these end of the year shows. I just like to mention that because I do think that a lot of times people are so pro card hungry that they're like, afraid to take the step back, and then they end up kind of robbing themselves of the opportunity
really good advice.
to make the changes. So I know that kind of diverts a little bit. I just did want to mention that with these end of the year shows, like I usually only have people do them if I know either like that timing works better for them each, that time of year, or we're really close. There's not a whole lot of growth needed to happen during that time.
Yeah, and if you were to just take it from Junior USA's, or Olympia Amateur, for example, let's use that as the first pro qualifier show of the year, in February,
March.
First week of March. So if you were to do that show and your feedback was to be get more muscle, the last pro qualifier of the year is nationals in November. Can you put on enough muscle between March and November? Maybe. Okay. Really, the better strategy there is to really go into a solid improvement season, really work on your physique, and then target those pro qualifiers in the start of the year, the following year. I mean, and this is going to vary person to person, but I would just say,
it depends on how much muscle you need,
right.
and how
That's
quickly
right.
you grow, how much, time, energy, and effort you're putting in, all of those things. But I agree. I totally agree with that. So the last show of the year has been in December. It's moved a couple times. So that's it, and it did move locations as well, which is nationals. It's now in Texas. Before it was in Florida. So I think it was in Texas last year, and it's staying in Texas this year. So I do think that they're going to keep it there. We'll see. That one is 2 pro cards per class. I would say that's usually the most competitive show of the year. So, you get a lot of those athletes that were really killing it during the summertime, plus the athletes that, decided to wait till the end of the year. You kind of get a
amalgamation
of a lot of really strong athletes. So, I mean, it's not something to be afraid of. And at the same time, like, it's something to just understand. Like, I mean, some of the classes this past year were close to 40 athletes. And we're talking 40 athletes that have been winning overalls, that have been placing well at nationals. Like, I mean, maybe not all 40, but I mean, the point is that, we sometimes see people in second, third call outs that, could have won another show, another division. So it's just something to, I feel like, always be aware of and go into it with the proper, mindset.
Expectations, right. And if your goal is to compete as a pro after you get your pro card, I would tell you the Nationals is the best place to get that assessment, because if you get your pro card at the Nationals, and I mean, all the national shows, I think you're being assessed about do you have a pro worthy physique? But then the determination of whether you are competitive as a pro as a whole is a little bit different for that. So I think the judges are really oriented towards choosing physiques that can be competitive on the pro stage, but you're always subject to who shows up. At the Nationals, because the competition is so heavy, man, that's a really good place to assess. And again, this is about setting your expectations, is that if your goal is to be competitive as a pro, then as an amateur, you want to get on stage with the most competitive athletes so that you are honing your craft and you are really getting the feedback about whether you have not just a pro physique for being a pro, but are you going to then be a competitive pro? It's just something to factor into what are your longer term goals in this.
Right. And don't get us wrong. Every single one of these shows that we're talking about is competitive, and it all depends on who shows up in your class on that day. So some of it's a luck at the draw. So we're kind of giving you more general things to consider. One other thing I would say to consider is, if your goal is to jump right in and do a pro show, you can't at the end of the year, because we're done.
Right.
So Nationals is the last show of the year. You're done. We're shutting it down for the holidays, which is something I want you to also consider, is that if you do decide to do nationals at the end of the year, you're rolling right into Christmas. You're also having to diet through Thanksgiving. So these are things I want you to consider, because you don't want to have a crazy rebound because you're jumping right into the holidays. So just making sure you're protecting your mindset, your time. You've got a plan coming out of that show, and you're ready to, to execute on that plan. Because that's one of the things I've seen. If people aren't as disciplined and they're coming out right in the middle of the holidays and they've been dieting, and especially if they competed since the summertime, a lot of times that's going to make that even more difficult. So these are all things to consider when you're picking which show you want to shoot for.
And this is part of what you can get working with a coach, and a coach who maps out, who gives you a roadmap. And hey, this is our roadmap. This is our timeline. This is what we're planning on. And correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there a couple of international pro shows after nationals?
No, I don't believe after nationals. There might be a couple. I might
thought
be
I
wrong.
saw some on the schedule this year, but that's
most people are wanting to compete
right.
domestically. So I mean, those are all things to think about and consider, though. So that's kind of wraps it up for our national level shows. If at that point you've earned your pro card, then it's time to start thinking about the next level. So we'll jump into that a little bit as well. a lot of things to consider when you're going to step on the pro stage. Usually what I hear the judges telling athletes is, listen, you just won your pro card. If it's not obviously at the end of the year and there's not a pro show available, go ahead and put yourself out there, jump into a show, go and do a pro show without the expectations, see how you stack up. That way, you know what to go and work on in your improvement season. The only caveat I would say to that is, I have seen people who've got their pro card after competing for years and years and years to get it, and they really need a break, maybe a mental break, emotional break, a physical break. Like, also think about, how much time have you been taking away from your family, things like that. So it might make sense for you to not jump right into a pro show, just based on all those factors. But if those factors are all good, your body's responding well, you're in the right mindset for it, then jumping in and seeing how you compare to the pro level athletes, I think can really help set you up for success. I will say for myself, I jumped right in. I turned pro at the USA's, and then my first pro show was the Dallas Europa. And I did end up placing 5th, and then I did qualify for the Olympia at my second pro show. I actually saw other ladies that turned pro with me at the same time that thought, oh my gosh, I need to grow so much. And they took off a year and came back and actually overshot the mark a little bit. So they weren't gauging, where they were as well, to help them, properly execute on that period of time.
Let me put a pin in that just for perspective, is that when you're getting feedback after your national show, so you've been at a national show, you got your pro card, congratulations, excellent. Your feedback's going to be on your physique for sure, but it's also on your physique as compared to the number of competitors and the competitors in that first call out. Those are really what you're going to get your feedback based on. It's a comparison sport in terms of the judging. So you're going to get feedback based on who was on stage, how they looked, how you compared to them. The value of getting on stage then as a pro is that you're going to then get a different perspective of your feedback based on now you're competing as a pro and who's on stage with you there. So all these other pro competitors, they are not second, third, fourth, fifth, eighth place in a national show. They have also gotten their pro card the same way you have. And that's why it's just a different perspective in level setting what your feedback is. And that's why I think what you're saying is that, I don't think what you're saying, that is what you're saying, is that it's just going to be a different eye that's going to give you feedback on that pro stage versus what you got on the amateur stage.
True. And one of the things I've explained to people too, if you earn your pro card in a first place position, you get to do the overall at the national show, which is your first pro show.
Right.
Now you're up next to everybody who just turned pro.
That's right.
Which is kind of cool. And I mean, that can help you gauge as well. So if you're not going to jump into a pro show right after, if you were able to do the overall, kind of seeing where you stacked up in there is one good thing to do. It is helpful. And at the same time, these are all newbie pros. So you get up on the stage with, when you've got Olympians next to you and people that have been doing this for a really long time, it's going to be very different. And I think one of the things that you're going to realize is you do have a lot more time on stage at this point. So you're going to need to work on your individual routine. That's going to be a little more elaborate. Everything needs to be more polished, so things you might get away with at an amateur level, whether it be tan, hair, makeup, posing, like all those things are going to be elevated at that next level. So we always talk about, like, if you want to be the fastest runner, then run next to somebody who's really fast, because they're going to make you better. So this is what we're talking about the pro level. Like, get up there and be next to the people that are fast, that are really good, because it's going to help you see those things that you need to work on and that are.
And I'll quote our good friend and coach, Drew Brannon, who provides really the best description I can think about regional versus national versus pro. And some of you might be listening to this, so I'm going to describe this using a ruler. So imagine a ruler, a foot ruler, okay? And that foot ruler, that's your perspective of competitors and the quality of those competitors at the regional show. Then you take those 12 inches and now cut that down to a 6-inch ruler, and that's your level of competition at the national level. Now take that 6-inch ruler and cut that down to an inch, and that's your competition at the pro level. So as you're climbing that pyramid, and I hope that visual works for you.
You're talking about room for error.
That's right.
Room for error is shrinking.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about room for error. I'm also talking about the quality of the competition. At the regional shows, there's just a broader range of competition. At the national show, it's a much narrower range of competition. On the pro stage, it's that 1 inch.
You're splitting hairs at that point, right?
And oftentimes it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's just that the judges preferred another athlete's physique on that day at that time.
Yeah,
and
even confidence plays a huge role,
right.
you know. So that's why
presentation on stage.
Yeah, that's why going into it, I feel like when I started competing as a pro, I had zero expectations. I was just so excited to be there. I was next to these women that I had admired for so long, and I just embraced it as like, wow, this is so fun. This is so cool. And I didn't put pressure on myself. And I think that really fed into the success that I had. And certainly, you know, over time, we tend to like put in more and more pressure on ourselves. I just tell people, like, go into it just with no expectations, to have fun, to get feedback, to keep learning and growing, and you're going to present better on stage. You know, that doesn't mean you work any less hard,
right.
or, you know, it just means that you go into it with the right kind of attitude, and that's going to shine on stage. Some cool things about moving from national to pro level. You typically have a certain time that you're going on. You have a certain time for check-ins. You know, things get a little bit, you know, easier to maneuver, like setting your hair, makeup times, tan times, things like that, because you have a more specific go time typically. So there are a lot of differences when you're choosing your very first pro show, you know, understanding, you know, the timing of shows and the size of shows and who's judging different shows is really helpful. So I really think at that point, it does help to have somebody who's very knowledgeable to help guide you to start with. When I have a new pro, my goal is to put them in front of as many different panels as I can in a short period of time, so that a couple different things can happen. Number one, I can get a lot of feedback. I can get them, you know, next to different athletes, in front of different judges, and really be able to assess what we need to work on, where we are. The other thing I'm always assessing is, like, are there certain judges that are gravitating towards this person's look and physique? Because like you're saying, you know, we're splitting hairs at this point, you know, and it's, everybody looks so good that when there's just slight differences between the two, for example, you know, when we just finished the Arnold, the top two, there was 1 point difference. So half the panel had one person, half the panel had the other person, and just one person going one way or the other could have made the difference. So, you know, again, it becomes more subjective, and it is, you know, while we do have criteria and things that we look at, there's also a level of subjectivity. There is that pageant aspect to it as well. So I do feel like, you know, the more feedback you can collect when you're brand new, the more successful you're going to be long-term. And choosing shows that are going to be a little bit smaller can be helpful, just because they won't be quite as overwhelming. You know, if you go into a show, you know, some of the bigger shows are, you know, the Pittsburgh Pro, the New York Pro, the Tampa Pro. Some of these shows, you're going to be against a lot of Olympians, a lot of athletes that have been competing for quite a long time, that are very seasoned. So there's benefits to that, in that you're getting to see them, you're getting to stand next to them, you're getting to learn through that process. So I'm not saying don't do it. I just also think that setting an expectation and starting with some of the shows that are a little bit smaller can help, just to get your feet wet, and then graduate up to some of those bigger shows makes a lot of sense.
And as we're talking about those pro shows in particular, I think it's also just like in the amateur ranks, look at the location, look at travel, look at your schedule, and I would say this is, think about your overall strategy about that show, which I think you touched on in terms of the size of the show and some of the bigger ones versus some of the smaller ones. But I do think looking at your overall strategy in terms of not just that show, but which is, I consider the individual shows as an objective versus the goal is getting to the Olympia stage. So how do you set yourself up for success on that? And again, that's the value of having a coach, designing a roadmap, being, you know, playing chess instead of checkers. Is it not just about that singular show, but what's my overall plan? How am I going to continue to evolve and improve in the sport? Think about those big ticket items.
Right. The nice thing is there are no entry fees once you do get to the pro level. And what you're saying is absolutely true. If there's something you can drive to versus having to buy a ticket, you know, that's something to consider. And a lot of times I'll tell people, like, do a little bit of research before we commit to the show. See, what is it going to cost you? I do coach a lot of international athletes, so that's a huge consideration for them. You know, we do our best to find like a group of maybe 2 to 3 shows that they can do when they travel into the U.S. so that they can get in early, acclimate to the time zone and all of those kinds of things, and then we'll start competing. So, you got to have your budget, and we have a whole episode that talks about expenses and budgeting that you can listen to if that's something that you're not aware of. But I would just say that's something to think about. And you had talked about the goals at the pro level, and to me, number one, first thing is get your feet wet, just even see how you stack up.
Right.
From there, setting realistic goals, like top 10. It's kind of that as a nice goal. And then, okay, top 5. And then, that Olympia qualification. I think sometimes people, especially, they got that momentum going. They've done now really well at a local level. They've done well at national level. You got to gauge it. A lot of times people then, especially people that turn pro really quickly, a lot of times hit their head and realize, oh, okay, this is a different level of competition. So just being prepared for that.
And we have talked about this generically as the open pro shows. I think we should talk a little bit about the Masters pro shows as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So right, we're talking about the open, but there are a lot of the shows that have a Masters division, or there are even some shows that are Masters only. So that's also something to consider. If you go to the pro show list on the website, those are all marked, and some of them will only have 35 plus. Some will only have 40 plus, and some will have 40, 45, 50, 55, and so on. So depending on where you are in your journey and what your age is and where you want to compete, I would consider all of those things. Obviously we talked about the goal as a pro is to win and go to the Olympia. That would be if you win in the open. If you win at the Masters, you really start building a resume. The ultimate goal there is to go and compete at the Masters Olympia, which just started last year. They have
Romania.
Yes, they have it every other year, and it's an invitational. So in order to be able to go, you would send in your resume and information about yourself. So competing as a Masters pro, you start to build up your resume to then ultimately apply to compete at the Masters Olympia.
And so it's the Arnold and the Arnold UK and the Masters Olympia that are invitation only.
Right.
Okay. And then the Olympia is qualify. You have to win a pro show.
Yes. So the current rule is the only way to the Olympia is winning a pro show. If someone's won the Olympia within the last 5 years, they're automatically qualified for the Olympia. If they won the Olympia more than 5 years ago, then they have to actually ask for permission if they didn't win a pro show. So that's the current rules, and rules do change, and they're all posted on the website. So
yeah,
I would
the rule you decided was a rule that was this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So every year, there's new things coming out. They're really good about announcing them. I would just make sure you're staying up on it and just, paying attention to what's going on. But yes, so that's basically how that would work. If you are competing at any of these pro shows with multiple different age levels and an open, you can compete in all of them that you qualify for based on your age.
And the invitational, so the Arnold UK, and what was the other one that we just talked about?
Masters Olympia.
Masters Olympia, sorry. That's an application process. So, and the website will describe what you have to submit as part of that application. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's a resume. And so as Jamie's talking about, building up your resume to apply for these invitationals, the same is true for the Arnold, and the same is true for Arnold UK and Masters Olympia, is that they want to see athletes who both, yes, have won shows, but they're also looking for people who are ambassadors for the sport, who are, showing some level of appeal to athletes all worldwide. So take that into consideration, because it's not just about winning shows. It's about what you're doing outside of it, being an ambassador for the sport. How are you showing up, or is this just something that you're doing, on the side, which it may be, but how are you advancing the sport? How are you showing up for the athletes? How are you giving back to the sport as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've kind of covered all the levels. The only thing I would add to that is, once an athlete does qualify for the Olympia, there's typically 40 to 50 athletes on that stage. All of those athletes, the way that it currently works, do compete in the pre-judging. And then from there, they whittle it down to the top 10, and the top 10 go to the night show. It's an honor for every single person that steps on that stage. We've just talked about all these levels, all this work that goes into getting to that point. So, it's definitely one of those things where it's an honor to be there.
Right.
And, once an athlete does get to the Olympia, the work doesn't stop.
Right.
They're still getting feedback. They're still working on improving and getting better. They're working on getting, working their way up the ranks at that level. So each level's got its challenges. My best advice is embrace every level, enjoy everyone, be present for everyone, while of course you're looking ahead to what's next at the same time. Enjoy the process.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah.
It only gets harder.
That's right. And if we were using that ruler analogy, 12 inches being the bandwidth for a regional show, 1 inch for the pro shows, man, the bandwidth for the Olympias maybe an eighth of an inch or less than that. It may be 1/100th of an inch. It's top to bottom competitors who have all won pro shows
all over the world.
There are going to be international competitors up on that stage that you maybe have never seen in the States that just look phenomenal. So it's a wonderful experience to see, and just know that the difference between first and 40th or 44th is just very, very small, very small.
So hopefully this helped. Hopefully it gave you guys a little bit more understanding. We did have several people reach out to us and ask us to talk about this. So I really, really hope this is what they're looking for. And please keep giving us this feedback and letting us know what you want to hear about, because that helps us deliver the information. And we're really happy to do it.
Which is the like, comment, subscribe, and did I get them all?
Yep.
Forget. Leave your
Review.
like, comment, and what did you say?
Review.
That's right. Like, comment, subscribe, and leave your review. And remember the 3 B's, which is be good to yourself,
be good to each other,
and be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.